After a long off season, it's finally here. It's football season. Although your draft will provide you the core of your fantasy rosters, it's vital to constantly improve your roster, taking advantage of good matchups and future possibilities. Every week, I'll be bringing you a video answering two simple questions. Who should I stream this week and who should I stash on the Fantasy First Down? I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down. Did you have Javonte Williams in your fantasy lineups? Well, if you were listening to my preseason videos, there's a good chance you did because I was way above him in consensus rankings, and I feel pretty good one game into the season. Let's hope it holds on. If you want more fantasy advice and want to get my weekly rankings, make sure you head over to Instagram at the Fantasy First Down or to Twitter Fantasy First Down with no O. That's where you can ask me all my questions, or you can get the rankings themselves over at ffdfantasyfootball.com. I have been a top 12 accuracy ranker the last 3 seasons through Fantasy Pro, so hoping to make it 4 years in a row. Today, we are talking streamers and stashes. To keep things really simple, I'm going to define a streamer as any player you wouldn't usually start who is a viable option for this week. They may be on your bench or they may be on waivers, depending on your league. We'll define a stash as any player you could potentially find on waivers that you should stash for the future, maybe because they've got a good matchup in a couple of weeks' time or because they could become a future fantasy starter. I'll be going through a couple from every single position. Let's get into it. We're going to start off with the quarterbacks, and Trevor Lawrence is a great streamer for this week. The Jaguars face a mediocre offense in week 1. Carolina conceded the third most points to quarterbacks last season and have done little to improve their defense. Meanwhile, Lawrence gets a major receiving upgrade in Travis Hunter, which should stimulate a passing game that stagnated at times last season. Vegas lines imply the Jaguars will be the 6th highest scoring team this week. So, Lawrence is a great week 1 streamer if you lack a reliable option. Don't like Lawrence? Well, you can always go with Jordan Love. The Packers host the Lions, a defense that was terrible against the pass, but excellent against the run last year. Green Bay enters a possible shootout as favorites, with Vegas suggesting this will be the 2nd highest scoring game of the week. Jordan Love will need to throw for multiple touchdowns and 300 odd yards to make that happen. That makes him a great streaming option in week 1. Now, if you're set for week 1, but you just want a good bench option, possibly because you missed the top 8 quarterbacks and want more chance of hitting on a top quarterback, well, I suggest Caleb Williams. Available in shallower leagues, Williams is a great stash for fantasy, but I'd want to see him in week 1 before throwing him into lineups. The injection of Colston Loveland and the rookie Luther Burden, supplemented by Ben Johnson's play calling, an upgraded O-line, which is a big deal this offseason, and likely a second-year jump from Rome Odunze, should lead to a significant improvement in the Bears' quarterback's production. He was a top 10 quarterback for me entering the season, and I highly recommend stashing him if he's available in your leagues. Meanwhile, another guy who's rostered in way more leagues, or available in way more leagues, he's rostered in only a third of them, is JJ McCarthy. He's a fantastic stack in leagues of all sizes. I've got a lot of shares. After redshirting his rookie year, McCarthy enters an offense that made perennial underachiever Sam Darnold look like a great quarterback. He was the quarterback 8 in fantasy last year. At Michigan, McCarthy also showed solid rushing potential, making him have a generally solid floor. But it's the upside that intrigues me personally about the youngster. The combination of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Adam Thielen, TJ Hawkinson, and a good receiving back in Aaron Jones should provide McCarthy with a heap of scoring opportunities this season. So get him on your bench. Now, running backs. And we're going to go to the Jaguars again, Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. The Panthers were generous to quarterbacks last season, but they were downright careless with running backs. Carolina conceded 3.5 more running back points per game than any other team. That's bigger than the gap from 2nd to 12th. Crazy. Now, the return of Derek Brown will certainly help turn things around. They have improved their D-line a little bit, but with Jacksonville projected to score a very healthy 25 points this week, I'm banking on sizable contributions from both Etienne and Bigsby. We're not really sure who's going to be the lead guy at this stage. I do think it's probably Bigsby taking the early down work and the goal line work, and that Edian gets a lot of the receiving work, the third down work, and maybe some of the early down stuff. Edian's certainly the higher projected player according to ECR, but I do think we're going to see more Bigsby than most people are expecting. I'm not going out of my way to start either, but I do think they're viable options if you're struggling at the position. This is a hard position to stream at the moment because it is pretty projectable and they're going to be consistent week to week. So it's hard to say someone's going to have a far better week than we expected. Someone that is going to be doing a lot better than most people expected, though I have been ranking him top 30 consistently, is Jaylen Warren. Mike Tomlin has been very consistent in his messaging about Warren being the lead back in Pittsburgh. Warren has been at the top of the depth chart literally all preseason, with Caleb Johnson still the running back 3, also behind Kenny Gainwell, or as Tomlin calls him, Kenny G. This was reflected in his preseason usage. That's Warren's preseason usage. Then they gave Warren a new 2-year extension before Tomlin just flat out announced that Warren would be the clear lead back this week for Pittsburgh. He's a solid running back 2/flex, depending on the situation, if it's PPR or not. And it is a middling matchup against the Jets, but I'm certainly starting him if I need a running back. Now, let's talk stashes. And I actually had Javonte Williams in here before I watched the game. And obviously, I'm going to leave him in there. He's been a top 30 back for me all preseason. I think week one's done the arguing with for me. I don't really need to say anything about this. But Nick Chubb is someone that a lot of people are pretty low on. I know for a lot of people, he's not even a top 50 back coming into the season, but it does seem like Joe Mixon's going to be out for a lot of time. And I nearly listed Nick Chubb as a streamer. I'm just a little bit nervous in how he's going to be used in the offense with no Joe Mixon. Damian Pierce and Woody Marks are hanging around, but I think it is very possible that we see a lot of Chubb with Dare Ogunbowale doing the third down or 2-minute drill stuff, or certainly the third and long stuff. Chubb getting basically an every down role outside that, making him an excellent stash, as he should be far more effective another year recovered from his knee injury. Now, if you're looking for a slightly deeper stash, well, running backs get injured more than any other player in fantasy, with the average top 36 running back missing 2 games per season in fantasy. For that reason, your best bet in fantasy is to roster running backs who are an injury away from an every down role. Each week, I'll be telling you my favorite running back stashes, only including players who wouldn't be starting most weeks. Remembering that on your bench, you should have at least 2, maybe 3 good running backs who only need one thing to change, and all of a sudden they'd be a viable starter for you. My favorite, of course, is the obvious ones like Jordan Mason and Zach Charbonnet, but they're owned in most leagues. In deeper leagues, you're going to see Rico Dowdle taken by most people, but he's a great upside player because he's going to get a lot of receiving work. I think in PPR, you actually find that he's a flex option. He's probably going to look quite a lot like Zach Charbonnet. We even saw the coaching staff come out and say that they are going to take a little bit of the work away from Chuba Hubbard and not run him into the ground this season. That's where Dowdle comes in for me. I think Brian Robinson has a heap of upside. CMC already looks like he's injured, and Robinson is going to be the backup guy for him. Rashad White, we know how good he can be when there's no Bucky Irving. DJ Giddens is the guy in Indy behind Jonathan Taylor, and we know that Indy has a great running offense just based on their play calling and also their O-line. So I do think Giddens could have a lot of value. He is the clear number 2, although Tyler Goodson would probably be involved a little bit if Taylor was out. Braylon Allen, I like a lot. He's going to be useful again just as a flex option if you're desperate in PPR, but he is a very good handcuff for Breece Hall, who's only going to be used about 50% of the time apparently this season. So we're going to see a lot of Allen and Isaiah Davis anyway. Ray Davis, another Davis, is someone that I love behind James Cook. Najee Harris obviously will be very good if there's an injury to Amari and Hampton. Caleb Johnson, I mean, everyone knows that he's a good option, but he's going to be taken in every league. Kendre Miller is directly in behind Alvin Kamara. It's not Devin Neal. It's definitely Kendre Miller. He's the guy to own if you want the handcuff to Kamara, who's going to get a lot of action, especially early in the season. That could easily lead to an injury. Trey Benson is very popular behind James Conner, but he's really more of an early down guy. I think we'd see a lot of Amari Demicado if we find out that Connor has gone down. So Benson has limited upside for that reason. Ollie Gordon's another guy with limited upside because if Jalen Wright comes back, wouldn't surprise me if Gordon just lost the role or if it's some sort of committee situation. Kareem Hunt does seem to be the guy behind Isaiah Pacheco, and I think he's probably going to get quite a bit of action straight away and probably a flex option most weeks. If there's an injury to Pacheco, is it Hunt as the every down back? Maybe, but he's probably more of a low down running back too, which limits his upside. Blake Corum interests me, but I am scared of Jaquez Hunter. There's a lot of upside there with Corum, but a lot more risk that you've got someone on your bench who is an injury away from making something happen, but then when the injury happens, maybe nothing happens anyway. So that's why he's lower on my list. And finally, Keaton Mitchell, who's really only an early down guy, but gosh, he could be good if Derrick Henry goes down. Now let's talk wide receivers. And Matthew Golden is someone that I'm going to recommend, despite usually not recommending rookies on their debuts, especially when their role isn't clearly defined. But Matthew Golden's Packers host one of the league's most generous secondaries in Detroit. The Lions have conceded top 4 points to wide receivers each of the last 3 years, and that does seem unlikely to change this year. With Jaden Reed hobbled by a foot injury and Christian Watson out for the season, the rookie has a golden opportunity, pun intended, to make an immediate statement in the NFL. Expect some big play opportunities and a good chance of a week 1 touchdown. Meanwhile, if you want a super deep streaming option for your first week, and I don't know why you would, but maybe you've got a whole heap of injuries or just looking for some upside in a deep league, well, I've got someone who's owned in literally 0.2% of leagues, and I've got to assume that most of them are dynasty leagues. It's Olamide Zaccheaus. The Bears face the league's most generous secondary in Minnesota. And I know what you're thinking. All 3 Chicago starters are rostered in my league. That is where you are wrong, friend, because Olamide Zaccheaus was obviously the slot receiver throughout the preseason, and it wasn't particularly close, with Luther Burden, the wide receiver 5 on the official depth chart, and playing like that in the preseason as well. And we know how much Ben Johnson loves using his slot receiver. There's an opportunity here in deeper leagues if you need a last-minute pickup. Keep in mind, this isn't going to last for long. Burden will probably eventually win out the role, and it's probably just taken longer because he had that preseason injury. But Zaccheaus is someone that you're going to be able to use for the next couple of weeks. Big risk, obviously, using a player where you're not clear on their exact role, but I think there's a little bit of upside here and someone you can use if you're in a bind this week. Meanwhile, let's talk stashes, and Quentin Johnston's my first one. He's a former first rounder. He's enjoyed a great preseason, locking up the ex-receiver job, while rookie Trey Harris has been fighting it out with Keenan Allen for the outside receiver spot on the other side. How targets and routes are handled remains to be seen, but Johnston has a real chance of being the number 2 guy in a Chargers offense expected to take a real step up this season. Meanwhile, Cedric Tillman had 3 huge weeks last week before an injury knocked him out for the season. This year, he's back, and he's the clear number 2 wide receiver in what should be a relatively pass-heavy offense that will need to chase points. We've seen Joe Flacco do it in the past through the air. No reason to believe that can't happen in this case, especially with a very weak defense. It's worth seeing how week 1 pans out, but I think Tillman's someone well worth stashing on your bench, as the upside is immense if things click for him like we saw at a brief period of time last season before that injury in 1 bad week. Now, tight ends, and my favorite streamer this week is Cade Otton. There's a proverb that says, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Pretty sure that's not just an Australian thing. Well, in Tampa, when the wide receivers are away, Cade Otton plays, and he plays well, especially for fantasy. In the 8 weeks between Chris Godwin's injury and Otton himself getting injured, the Buccaneer tight end was the tight end 8. Godwin remains out of the lineup, and it seems Emeka Ibuka will replace Jalen McMillan out wide, leaving a lot of room in the middle of the field for Otton and the underwhelming Sterling Shepard, who will be their wide receiver 3. It's not going to be Tez Johnson or someone like that. Otton could easily have a big week 1. You know he's going to be out there for pretty much every snap now that it seems like he is healthy going into the game. And meanwhile, one of my big favorites going into the season, I've drafted him everywhere, and I've recommended you do it as well throughout the preseason if you've been watching those videos. It's Brenton Strange. He consistently outperformed Evan Ingram last season. He had 4 top 10 finishes to 1, despite Ingram starting significantly more games between the two. Strange is a fantastic but sneaky streamer or stash depending on his situation. He faces the generous Panthers in week 1. I've already talked about them plenty. But even if you don't need him this week, just pop him on your bench. He could easily finish the year as a top 10 tight end. He's basically replacing Evan Ingram, but arguably he's a little bit better. He's certainly better in the red zone and scores a lot more touchdowns, which is something Ingram doesn't really do. So I like Strange better than actual Ingram this year. I'm really low on Evan Ingram. I think Strange is someone you're going to want to pick up. If you've got Ingram, there's a lot of risk that he busts this year because I think we're going to see a lot of Adam Troutman. So just pick up someone else just in case that happens. I also think it's possible Ingram's great this year, but I think you need a second guy just in case. Finally, tight end stashes and Darren Waller. Last season, Jonnu Smith finished as the tight end 4 in fantasy, and then he shifted off to Pittsburgh. His replacement is Darren Waller. The veteran clearly isn't in game shape yet. He's not even really training every single day, but later in the season, he could be a real league winner taking over that same spot. I'm stashing him in pretty much every league because he's pretty much free at the moment. Anytime I don't have a top 3 tight end, I've got Waller on my bench because, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? The upside's huge, and if it doesn't work after 3 or 4 weeks, you just drop him. It's fine. So if you need a tight end, he is someone that I really like. Now let's talk kicker and DST streamers. I'm not going to talk stashes for kickers and DSTs, and I mean this seriously. Do not put a kicker on your bench. Just stream them. Every single year, I stream kickers, and then I add up the points scored by the kickers I streamed. Last time I did this, and I did the calculation 2 years ago, I believe my streamers were the second highest scoring kicker on the year, and I'm only streaming people who are available in most leagues. So this is something you really should be doing. It's crazy to be drafting a kicker anywhere before the last round, and DST should only be the second last round. 2 of the last 3 years, I've been the top ranking DST ranker on Fantasy Pros. So trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Kicker streamers, and Cam Little is the Jacksonville kicker, and I hope you're seeing a theme because it's start plays against the Panthers, and this is not going to be the last time you hear this. This was my theme throughout last season, and it really helped me with streaming. That's not to say the Panthers are going to be equally bad this year, but I'm at least starting off this way because it's all we've got at this stage. Worked well last season. I don't see a reason to change it until I see a reason to change it. So Cam Little is someone that I like in what should be a high-scoring game. Will Reichert is the other one. I would suggest streaming him. The Vikings kicker was excellent in fantasy last year, and he starts things off with a pretty juicy kicker matchup. Meanwhile, the DST streamers, and I mean, Spencer Rattler is the worst starting quarterback in the NFL, arguably. I think that's not really a hot take. So I'm starting the Cardinals DST, who takes him on. They face him in week 1. They're not the best DST, but it's a fantastic matchup. I think they're going to be very useful. I think I've ranked them top 5 this week. And another team I've ranked top 5 is the Commanders. Spencer Rattler may be the worst starter, but Russell Wilson isn't a lot better at this stage of his career. Vegas has New York as one of the league's lowest scoring teams this week, and I expect a lot of sack production from the Commanders, especially up the interior. So slot in either the Commanders or the Cardinals. That doesn't mean you can't use whatever DST you drafted. Just make sure you head over to ffdfantasyfootball.com, check out my rankings, and you can decide there whether you should be starting the guy you have or whether you should be getting rid of them and getting in one of my suggested streamers. Now, if you've got any questions, you can either hit me up in the comments below. Happy to do start sits for you, or you can hit me up over at Instagram at the Fantasy First Down, or on Twitter at Fantasy First Down. Fantasy First Down with no O. Now, the other thing to keep in mind as well, if you need help with your lineups and waivers and you want some more intensive support where I basically help you hands-on with your team, for a very cheap price of $5 a week, I will help you out with everything you possibly need to know. You can basically message me with anything for your fantasy teams you want at any time of the week, and I will make sure that we get you winning your league. So hit me up at benwasley23@gmail.com if you're interested in that as well. I look forward to seeing you guys soon on the next video. Hope you're enjoying football being back. I certainly am, and I've got a whole lot of rankings to go off and do. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you guys next time.